Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. Today, I'm joined by Bill Feehley, Ellen Silverstein, and Barbara Smith. Well, first off, I want to introduce Bill Feehley. He is one of our past presidents and a longtime volunteer of the Society, and is now the new executive director of the Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals. As I begin my process of stepping out the door, which will be the end of June, beginning of July, the reins will be turned over to Bill. Good morning, Bill. Good morning, Ellen. Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Oh, well, thank you for stepping up. And I know you have a great love for the Society, and I know you're going to be doing an amazing job, and the Society cannot thank you enough for the time you've given us in the past, and I know the time that you'll be giving us in the future. So
my pleasure.
Having you on, and I know the reins will be taken care of, and you'll do an amazing job.
Oh, well, thank you.
So we'll see how that goes. We'll see what he says in a month from now.
I need her back. Yeah.
My hair's short now, but it might not be any in a month.
That's right.
There you go. Well, yesterday we all had the opportunity to attend the Eastern Regional Meeting of NASBA that was hosted through a virtual platform. Now, we learned a lot yesterday, and I know we have multiple topics that we're going to touch on. So let's go ahead and get started, because I want to make sure we hit on all these very key and important factors. Okay, the first one that everybody's been talking about is the evolution of the CPA profession. As you know, there have been multiple discussions about this for over 2 years on what the future of a CPA would look like. And the focus is how NASBA is looking at it, and what their focus and their key goals in getting us to start in that process of what the CPA will look like in the future. Now, NASBA stated they looked at 3 focus points. One, they wanted to make sure that the exam and education fit the candidate and all the stakeholders, that they wanted to assure the public was protected, and they wanted to make sure that the license could evolve and address the needs of the profession, not only now, but within the future. Now, with this in mind, NASBA proposed a CPA license model that focused on these points: a strong core in accounting, auditing, tax, and technology, deeper knowledge in 3 primary disciplines, the reality of the practice is adaptability and inflexibility, and to make sure we only have and continue to have only one designation, and that designation is CPA, Certified Public Accountant, as well as enhances the public protection that we foresee and that we will need in the future. Now, I know each of you are CPAs. So what are your thoughts on this proposal?
Well, I think it's an outstanding proposal, because it certainly allows someone who decides that they want to go for a master's in taxation to be tested on the taxation side of things, because they've made a decision that that's where their career is going to go, and that's where they should spend their time. It doesn't mean that they're not allowed to continue to do audit work and things like that. It's just that they then would have to develop their own personal professional competency in that particular field in order to do it. But it tests you on the things that you've studied for, and I think it's good for everybody.
Right. Ellen?
I would say too, I mean, our profession in general is having to adapt to many things. And we'll talk about more of that later, what with the COVID and everything else. So I've understood that, they're talking about the 150 credits, dropping it back down to 120 because we're not gaining as many candidates taking the exam anymore. We're also talking about having different focuses within the CPA, within that 150 credit. We don't need just an accounting degree. We can also have an information systems degree with the core classes that we need to do to sit for the CPA exam. So I do think that there's just we just need to be very adaptive and flexible as we move forward with this, because technology is changing, everything is changing, and we just need to be able to keep up with that, plus with the way that businesses are going to be working moving forward, right?
Right.
So
Right.
everybody's moving, either adapting to Xero or QuickBooks Online, or changing how they're actually doing business in order to stay in business. And as accountants, we need to understand that and move in that same direction.
Mhm.
So that flexibility, et cetera, is really going to be critical.
Mhm. Barbara?
I totally agree with all the comments. We are in a very changing world, and keeping the core of what we need to know to serve our clients, as well as allowing us to concentrate on one specific area, I think is very important.
Well, sorry guys, you just saw my husband buzz by. I apologize for that.
Okay.
They're working from home. This is what happens. So
Thank
thank you guys for those comments. Now with the proposed models, we have 4 set of stakeholders. We have the academia, we have the exam process, which is Prometric, the candidates, as well as, of course, the boards of accountancy. So these are 4 very important stakeholders that will be going through this process. So I know NASBA is taking steps on each of these individual with each individual stakeholder. Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about the education or academia and what they're doing with them?
As far as the schools and everything else, they're trying to work to develop core competencies, and they're also concerned about the accreditations and things like that to make sure that the colleges and universities are keeping up to the standards that need to be met. And one of the things that they were looking at was that not all accreditations are equal. So they need to also be looking at the accreditation councils to make sure that our candidates, when they're coming out of college, are prepared to sit for the exam and are prepared to actually be in the profession.
Right, exactly. And like I said, I think also they were really looking at really trying to assist all the higher universities and higher educational facilities with their curriculum, so that when we get in this process, that they have the tools they need to help the candidates prepare for this.
Right.
This
But that would be part of their
evolution.
accreditation program.
Exactly, right. So the other parts, of course, again, is the exam as well as the candidates and the boards of accountancy. So I know that working with Prometric throughout the years, there's multiple things that they want to make sure is covered. Ellen, do you want to talk a couple things about those? I think there's like 4 key items there. Do you see that?
Yes, I do. So we are looking to, our Prometrics has been designed, if I'm not mistaken, to work with the 1 to 2 year entry level accountant. So they're trying to get you right out of the gate. You want to take that exam as soon as you're out of college, or maybe even before. I know some students have been able to take that exam before they actually officially graduate. They're going to make it a 16-hour exam, which sort of mimics what some of us old timers went through back in the day when we had to do a straight 2.5 days of taking that test, and with 4 sections. So, which I think is shorter than what you've been taking. Is that not correct? Is it 5 sections?
There's 4 sections now.
Oh, still 4 sections. Okay, so there were more back in the day also. So, so good. They're just trying to, and you can take them in any particular order that you want. If you decide to take the practice section first, you can do that, or you want to take the law section, or whatever the terminology is these days for the exam. Then you can do it in any particular order. It's not required to do one after another. So yeah, so there you are.
One of the other things I liked about that was like the discipline that you pick. If you don't do well on your discipline, you're allowed to switch. It's not like once you decide, if say tax or whatever, you're not pigeonholed into that. You can change. But once you pass that particular item and you get that discipline, then you can't continue taking the test for those particular disciplines.
Yes.
I thought it was funny. One of the questions was, I guess they're going to be maybe 16 disciplines. And somebody said, what if somebody wanted to take all of the disciplines? Would they be allowed to do that? And I thought,
Who would want to?
You
Right.
aren't
Yeah.
enough. You know,
Right.
you want to focus on one part. And I agree with you, Ellen. I've always thought taking the test when you graduate from college is best because you're still in that kind of studious frame of mind. So it makes it a lot or somewhat easier. There's nothing
Right,
easy about this test.
Mhm.
right, right.
And
You got to be
so,
really focused, so.
right, exactly. So let's move on to the students, and then we're just going to transition right into the whole COVID-19 and the actual testing of that.
But before we go there, there's a
Sure.
couple other things that I think we need to address, and that's the
Sure.
exposure drafts that they have. There's one out right now that's due to be back by August 31st. But most of those are the UAA model rules and everything else, and it's primarily housekeeping things. So I don't know that we really need to do much on that. But the other two exposure drafts that are still to come out has to do with independence and staff augmentation, so that the accounting firm would be able to provide their clients with staff augmentation and not lose their independence. The NASBA is not in favor of this, but it's been brought before them, so they need to go through the steps, and there'll be an exposure draft on that. And then the other one has to do with peer review, that they will allow a system review to be done remotely, so that you don't have to do a live on-site system review. It'll be allowed to be done through the mail or through electronic means, not being in person.
Mm.
Right.
So we need to
That's very
keep our eyes open on those.
Yes.
Mhm.
And you know what, Bill, thank you so much for putting a pause there, because one thing we did not say in all of our talking here is that this whole process, the evolution of the CPA, that this is not even going to see anything within the next 1 or 2 years. They're saying they're not going to even launch the new CPA exam, which will address all these issues until January of 2024. So
Right.
I really applaud NASBA and AICP and Prometric for taking their time, really getting through the weeds and addressing all the issues and the questions before it's launched, which I think is a great idea. They're not just jumping right on this. I totally
Right.
agree.
And I applaud them that they give us enough time on the exposure drafts to actually put a response together, because the exposure draft that's due out right now, or that's due to be replied by August 31st, has been out since April. So they certainly give you enough time to really be able to get your thoughts together and express an intelligent opinion on it, not just a knee-jerk reaction.
Right. And, you know, and once again, the society, and I know you'll be spearheading that, we're looking at developing a comment on that to send in. So
Right.
thank you for doing that. Once again,
Sure.
the society is on top of these things. So let's move and let's try to transition a little bit over to the COVID-19 and what's going on, because two issues here. We have the COVID-19, how it affects our current licensees and how we're dealing with our boards of accountancies, which are, you know, currently in some instances still closed. It depends on what state you're in. And also how it is affecting our candidates who are taking the CPA exam. So let's touch on our licensees first and how we're interacting with our current boards. And let's just talk about Maryland. Any thoughts? Have you guys had any experience so far? Where did your license come due? Was there postponement? What kind of interaction have you received?
Well, I guess I'm lucky. I haven't had any yet. My license is good until next year, so hopefully that won't be delayed. But one of the things that they brought up at the NASBA meeting, the NASBA meeting yesterday, was that some candidates who pass parts of it have 18 months to complete the exam, or they start dropping the parts off. And they showed a map of the entire United States and how they're handling the 18-month issue for those candidates who fell into that with the COVID problems. And Maryland happens to be one that's handling it on a case-by-case basis. So you would need to apply for an exception. And as soon as they get that application, then they will look at it and see if you meet the requirements for having an exception made.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that could be rough if you're not, you're at the end of an 18-month period and can't get into the Prometrics yet to actually take your,
Right.
the parts that you need to do. That would be really rough. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
All that work and to have a whole section drop off, I can't imagine.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
I can't
know.
either.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know in Maryland that they have extended the time period. So if your license was due in June, you have until July 15th. That was all part of the executive order with licenses. So if your license was need to be renewed, which is great. They've also, the society has helped out the licensees by moving all of their education to a virtual platform so that you can continue getting the credits that you need to renew your license. So when it opens up, you have not in the laws, and that you can continue to get educated and you will be able to renew your license. So, which is a great thing. Now,
Yes, it is.
and so the other thing, which was I thought was interesting, was they stated that that all peer reviews were put on an automatic 6-month extension. AICPA did this. So I was worried about that because I really hadn't heard that too much on the Maryland side specifically. So I did reach out to the executive director at the Board of Accountancy, and she said, and she actually responded back to me. They were very, very quick in responding, and which we truly appreciate, that their system in the state of Maryland does not allow for auto extension. However, they will be, however, if you feel that you need that extension time period, that you do need to communicate that with them. So that will require you to reach out to the Board of Accountancy, letting them know that you are going to be late for your peer review and that they will be given a grace period of 6 months. So but like I said, it's not an automatic thing. You must reach out to them and communicate your needs to the board. So I just thought that was some really good, important information for those of our members who are still going through the peer review process.
Critical,
So,
very critical.
So, Bill, anything else on licensees? If not, we'll go to the candidates.
There were a couple things. One of them is that in an effort to help get the testing finished, they've eliminated the blackout period for testing. So it used to be that once you, if you failed a part of the test, you were blacked out for a couple of weeks before you could go back in and take it again. And that blackout is no longer in place. Also, there was a blackout between the testing periods, I believe. So like it would be 3 months and then it was a month blackout period, then it would be 3 months and a blackout. But those blackouts have now been taken away. The other thing that they're looking at is remote testing. So that since Prometrics can't keep up with the volume of testing that's being done, one of the things that they're looking at is in remote areas that you would be able to go to a college or university and have your exam proctored there, but you would do remote testing that way. And that is at the very, very, very beginning stages of being looked at. So it doesn't come into play yet. And they made it crystal clear that at this point in time, they're just looking for the next steps just to see what would happen with something like that. So we can't count on that. But while we were talking about the COVID-19, also the Prometrics is sending out letters to everybody telling them exactly what it is that they need to have for testing under COVID. Because if you don't have a mask, you're not allowed to take the exam at all. And they don't provide you with one. So you don't want to get there and then find out that you can't take the exam because you don't have a mask. That would be a killer.
Right, and they stated in that the question was asked, if you show up without a mask, would they have a supply there? And they
Said
they are not having a supply. You must come totally prepared with your mask. You will not be allowed in. And they were made that very, very clear. And I have to say that NASBA and Prometric really took some extra steps to make sure that those testing sites that are now open were COVID compliant, I guess is for a lesser word. And they actually brought in like members or scientists from Johns Hopkins and went toured a couple sites to make sure that, the layout and that certain things were taken care of. The waiting rooms were looked at and everything. And I really have to say that that was very, very impressive that they took those steps because, and for the protection, not only for their employees, but also for those candidates who are going to be taking the exam. And I thought that was great. I really do. And one other thing that they are changing is that before when you took the test, you were wanded down. That they're not doing that any longer because they figure that 6 foot social distancing will not be in effect at that point. So no more wanding before you go into the test. And also you will be given a scrap piece of paper and a pencil when you go in to use, and then that is destroyed. Isn't that what they said, Bill? That they were
I thought it was that you wouldn't be using scrap paper anymore, but they would be having a whiteboard.
No, that's the other way. They use a whiteboard now.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, I'm sorry.
the scrap paper. That way it's not being reused and multiple people are touching it.
Okay.
So, no, so you're right. So that'll be good. So like I said, and the important thing is, please look out, just as Bill stated, keep a lookout for that email. If you're planning on taking that test or you have an employee taking the test, please make sure that they look for that email because they're giving very specific guidance on what you need to, what steps you need to take before you go into the test site. I thought that they made that very clear.
Right. The other thing that I was a takeaway for me from the meeting yesterday was all of the implementation of new standards for the Accounting Standard Board, FASB, GASB, and things like that. All of those standards have been delayed on the implementation. So if you were an early adopter of those, you continue on. But if you're a late adopter of some of the new standards, you might want to take a look at what the delay dates are because they've changed. It's not the same date for everything. It's not like they said, well, all of the standards that were to go into effect July 1st have been pushed off to October 1st. So you need to look at each one of those to see if that standard applies to your clients.
Very good point. Yeah, you're right. Yes. So so let's close out with a final item, and I think this affects not all of us, but also the staff that we have working for us as well. It's working from home, and they touched on that, and because they know that many of us and your employees are working from home, and Bill, you want to start us off on that one?
Well, they were talking about different security levels and things like that that you need to make sure that you're using. And they said that it was important to make sure that you use WAPS, WPS security rather than WEEP security, WEP. Some of the things that they were talking about with the security features and everything else were just miles over my head. I didn't understand it. I'm a techno geek. I love all the toys and gadgets and everything else. But when it comes to talking the language about it, I'm out left field somewhere. So as much as I wish I could say I understood it all, I have no idea.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And Alan, Barbara, have you taken any additional steps working from home? One of the things they kept on really focused on is the multi-factor authorization. So have you guys initiated those with your office?
I hope most people are taking advantage of that because it's so easy. So multi-factor authentication is using your cell phone or an email as a backup to your username and password when you log into different secure sites. And it's a very important and not so hard to implement security step.
Right.
So I just got a new firewall box in my house yesterday from an old one that I had, and we went through the WPA2.
There you go.
So we're there. I just got a new Comcast router and modem from them to up my speed. Really was what I was looking for. But it too, because the technology keeps changing. We've talked about this so many times. The technology keeps changing. You sort of have to keep up, and you have to purchase the newer computer and the newer routers and just trying to maintain so that you are trying to do the best you can to secure your own data. and or have your employees doing the same, the two-factor authentication, working in the cloud workspace, with the, they use a thing called Duo, so it pings your cell phone in order to get in. So it's important stuff. We're the keepers of very highly sensitive information, as everybody knows. So the more we can do to help secure that, the better off we'll feel, as will our clients as well.
Bill, you were going to say something?
Nope.
Okay. Well, the one thing, oh, go ahead, Barbara.
My computer person also recommended was using a separate computer to do your personal shopping. So not doing that on your work computer. It's just one more rule. It seems like every time we turn around, there's another rule about computers. But it's a bad practice to implement, and it's not that hard.
The one thing I got from the presentation from that gentleman was the fact that if you have like a router that's 2 or 3 years old, that you really should look at upgrading to a new one, because the old routers really did not do the auto checking of virus scans, where the new routers, the PA2, is exactly what Ellen has it already built into their system that it automatically does that. And so if that's, and he said, the cost of routers, just like with televisions and everything else and computers, that used to be $3,000, has dwindled down. He says you can get a really good quality router that has the state-of-the-art technology for $100. And he said it's worth the investment, which I really, that like just brought it home for me, because how many of us are looking in our router system and saying, okay, let's do an update, because now the new routers will do it automatically. So
but the other thing that he was very adamant about was, as far as like antivirus software, make sure that you buy good antivirus software and you pay for a subscription for that, rather than getting those free ones where they only check it one time and then that's it. You want something that's going to be constantly updated, like a Norton's or McAfee or one of those things, and have it installed on your system so that it's constantly checking for viruses and other issues.
Right. Well, as I tell you, as you can hear from, and it was a really jam-packed 6 hours, I believe, wasn't it, Bill?
Yep, 6 hours.
Yeah, and it was very detailed, a lot of information. We gathered a lot of information. And again, this is one of the great things the society does, is attending events like this, so we can share that information with our membership through this type of platforms. So any last words that anyone would like to share?
I just hope everybody enjoys the nice weather outside today, and keep in mind that as much as we all like to work and we all enjoy it, make sure you take some time for yourself.
Very good thoughts.
Today at 3:30 would be a good opportunity, because we're doing a wine tasting.
Oh, that's right.
Exactly.
The wine tasting today at 3:30. That's right. Oh my goodness. Well, again, thank you guys for joining me this morning. It was a great program, a lot of great information, a lot of great sharing by everyone. And I want everyone to be safe, be kind to one another. Again, I want to say it's always been a pleasure. And Bill, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Welcome.
It's all you.
And we'll see you at 3:30.
And we'll see you at 3:30.
All right.
Have a great day,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.